Welcome to Mostly Mets. I'm Jimmy Mack, and today I want to give you my opinion on who is the biggest breakout player for the Mets in 2025. And that is Brett Baty. Now, I understand a lot of you are going to click the video off right now because you're going to say I'm crazy and you've seen this all before and you've seen him in the minors do great things and you've seen him in the spring do great things. Let me just give the argument for him at this point. You could think I'm wrong by the end of it and you could tell me I'm crazy, but in all honesty, I think it's too early to give up on Baty. Let me go over the timeline a little bit. Baty was drafted in 2019. He played a handful of games to end that season. Then in 2020, the season was canceled. Then he played 2021 and half of 2022 before being called up. Obviously, he hit a home run in Atlanta in his first big league at bat. Everybody was pumped. Everybody was psyched. And then he kind of fell apart after that. Got sent back down to the minors and has spent most of the last couple years in the minor leagues. He's been given chance after chance, especially last year where he came into spring training thinking he was going to be the starting third baseman, and he wasn't, or he was and then failed. Now, yes, he's been given many chances to succeed in the major leagues, and he hasn't done that. But you can say the same thing about last year's breakout star in Mark Vientos. If you look at their minor league numbers, Mark Vientos has over 500 more career at-bats in the minor leagues than Brett Baty. So, and Brett Baty also has a higher OPS, higher batting average. Like, he has been better in the minors. Mark Vientos was another guy. Yes, he wasn't given the same amount of chances as Baty, and he was never really thought of as highly as a prospect as Brett Baty, but he definitely had his opportunities. And he never really did much of anything with them until last year. And I remember Vientos had a great spring last year, still didn't make the team because the Mets signed J.D. Martinez. He was probably upset by that. And now he's playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a clubhouse problem. I think he understands it's a business and it is what it is. But you can see a lot of similarities between Baty and Vientos. Remember, 500 at-bats in the minor leagues, or 500 at-bats, is basically a whole season. So Vientos has had a whole season's more worth of at-bats in the minor leagues. And they're around the same age. So you can look at that kind of development and say that Vientos is a year ahead of Baty when it comes to development. So maybe Baty just needed a little more time. And that's not a strange thing. If you look around the league, right, everyone can point at Juan Soto or Bryce Harper, guys like that who came up at 19, 20, 21 years old and were stars right away. But that's not the norm, right? Most guys take until they're 25, between 24 and 26 to really establish themselves as a real major leaguer. That's why you don't see guys going into free agency until they're 30 years old. Because most guys don't come up when they're 19, like Juan Soto, who's a free agent and, at 26 years old. That's not a normal thing. Most guys struggle when they first come up, and it takes them a few years to really be established. It's harder to do that when you're in New York with all the people, the fans going crazy and the media downing you and all that stuff. It's harder because the Mets can't keep a guy up and let him struggle as long as maybe the Detroit Tigers could or the Miami Marlins could. Those guys can play a whole season, and they can struggle, and they can go through it and probably become better players for that. But when you play for the Mets, or you play in New York, or you play even in Boston, or any big market, if you play in LA, you don't have that same luxury. You have to come up and perform right away, or you're going down, and someone else is going to take your spot. That's why I really think, I understand this is going to be Baty's last chance, right? He's going to get most of the starting playing time going into the season with McNeil out. And with Acuna struggling a little bit in spring, there's been some comments by Lindor about maybe his being bored and maybe not working as hard and whatever. I don't think that's a huge deal either. I think he probably is really bored because he's probably too good for the minor leagues. But you also have to prove that you're good enough for the majors. But Baty has taken this spring as his opportunity to get back into the Mets' plans. I think before this spring, the Mets probably thought Baty was worth nothing. They weren't going to be able to trade him. They weren't going to be able to do anything with him, and they had to kind of build him back up to being a major league player. He had to prove that he was a major league player, And I think he's done that this spring. Whether you like it or not, whether you want him to have another opportunity or not, I really think he's going to get that shot, and he's going to get the most at-bats. He's going to get the most opportunity, and it's up to him. And I think he's playing with enough chip on his shoulder, with enough, grit right now that he knows it's his last chance. He knows he's not going to get another chance. If he's terrible for the first month while McNeil's out, he's going back to the minors, and he'll probably get traded for nothing or let go or whatever. They're just not going to keep giving him more and more opportunities. He'll be seen more as a bench depth piece than, a starter going forward. So I really think we need to give him this last chance. I know people are upset about that. But at the end of the day, he earned it. He earned all his playing time. And I think, do I think he's ever, I say he's this year's Mark Vientos. He's never going to be Mark Vientos, okay? He's not a 40 home run guy. He's not the power guy that Vientos is. But if he can be a Brandon Nimmo type of player, Nimmo's average has gone down over the last couple of years, but if he can be a 260, 270, even 280 hitter who has a high on base and hits 25 home runs and knocks in 75 runs, you don't have that production out of second base with most teams. Most guys are not going to give you that production out of second base. Second base generally is more of a defensive position. It's like a catcher, or you don't have tons of offensive weapons at second base. So if you're able to get adequate defense from him at second and an above average type of bat, that would be huge for the Mets going forward. Their lineup would be so deep if Baty can somehow turn into a Brandon Nimmo type hitter. Their lineup would be extremely deep, especially when Alvarez comes back and they're healthy. There's really no weak point in that lineup. So maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, thinking that he's going to be the breakout candidate of this year. But in reality, I think that he has a really good chance. It reminds me of Vientos last year, where now he's kind of playing with that chip on his shoulder. Someone has jumped ahead of him now, right? Vientos is ahead of him. He doesn't have his third base position anymore. Maybe in 5 years he does. Maybe Vientos goes to a DH or first base. But right now, Brett Baty knows that this is his last opportunity. Now, it could also be that he plays well and maybe shows a good bat and shows that he could play second base, and the Mets trade him. And I'm fine with that too, because you have other guys who can play second base. You have Acuna. You have Jet Williams. You have other guys who are coming for that position. So this is Brett Baty's time, and he has to know it. So it's sink or swim. I think he's going to swim, and I really do think he's going to have a breakout year. I don't really have anything else to say. Please, if you're still here, comment what you think is going to happen with Baty. Do you think I'm just being suckered in again, or do you think he's going to perform well? Also, please subscribe if you haven't. Give me a like. And until next time, let's go Mets.